Hey, here we go, another one of these. Oh my gosh, another one of these videos. So today we are going to be talking about case structure, but we're going to be talking about advanced case structure. When I say advanced case structure, what I mean is what we've been taught so far as policy debate and writing advantages and disadvantages is that we need four arguments, right? We need the uniqueness, and if we're let's pretend we're the affirmative for a second. The affirmative says the status quo is good or bad.
Depending on the resolution, I would say good.
If you're the affirmative, do you want to describe the status quo as good or bad? You want to say it's bad because you're the team that changes it. So we write one bad argument. Then we write a link. What does the plan do? An internal link. How does that change things? And an impact. Why does that matter? But that is baby's first advantage and baby's first disadvantage. We're not talking about that. What I'm going to show you is what is it I'm actually thinking of when I'm trying to prep you folks, and how am I approaching it? Or essentially, and the reason I'm mainly covering this is because obviously for my students and the team here at DVC, I've recently started giving them assignments where they're going to have to write cases. I want to show you what to me and what I was taught, kind of the model at Pacific, which comes from Stephen Farias and then probably ultimately from Todd Graham at Southern Illinois University, like how we like to model writing advantages, disadvantages. So we're gonna go ahead and get right into it, and we're gonna go through all the parts. So we will start with uniqueness. Eventually, we'll do our links. We'll do our internal links. And we will do our impacts. So, how do we write a file? Uniqueness, I guess taking one step back, all of these terms, even in this advanced format, still mean the same thing. Uniqueness arguments are still arguments about the status quo. Links are still arguments about what the plan, descriptions of the plan passing, internal links, what it does, impacts, why it matters. But we have certain specific subtypes of each of these that I like to work through. And there are three uniqueness points that we want, generally speaking. The first uniqueness point is sort of standard uniqueness, okay? It's probably what you're thinking of when you talk about uniqueness, okay? Which is to say, you want to have, and again, we're writing this from the position of the affirmative. First argument is stuff is bad. Absolutely, Danny. And obviously stuff's going to be relevant to the topic of the advantage. So far you're like, totally makes sense. That's what I've already learned. But now we go a little bit differently. The next thing we say is stuff will continue to be bad. And that, and I'll make a little note here, is what we call predictive uniqueness. Okay? Something wrong, Danny?
It was just.
Do you want to start over or what's up?
No, I think we're good. Just gotta.
Just adjust this period. Okay.
Okay, cool. Movie magic. How did it move itself? Anyway, stuff will continue to be bad, okay? So here's the difference between these two. If I'm trying to give you an example. Let's pretend we're writing an economy position. So the affirmative is going to say the economy's bad, the economy will get better in a world of the affirmative. Part one, you would say, according to, I don't know, whoever, according to the United States Treasury, the economy is doing bad for these three reasons, whatever it is. Predictive uniqueness, instead, does not describe what is happening right now, but instead makes claims about what is likely to happen in the future. So instead of saying economy is bad right now, it's reading a warrant that says something like projections from JP Morgan or from Chase Bank or whoever say that in 6 months the economy is likely to take a massive tumble or is likely to go down or whatever. Okay? So instead of saying things are bad now, we're indicating not only are things bad now, they will likely remain bad going into the future. And there's a few reasons we do this, and I'll come back to it once I put this third thing on the board. But the last kind of uniqueness argument we like to make is the brink slash, as Sasan likes to call it, precedence argument. And I'm probably going to spell this wrong, so I apologize if I do, but precedence. That's spelled right, isn't it?
I don't know.
You know precedence, like legal precedence? That's what that looks like.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you, it means a lot. Cool. So, you have two options for your third uniqueness argument. One, you can establish some kind of brink, some kind of key point at which things will be really bad if you're the affirmative, right? So you can say, like, if we're talking about, I'll give you an example. If we're talking about, like, I don't know, a political scenario, you might have a brink that's like, there will be a vote on this core issue on Tuesday. Like, there is a timeline for this where we can fix this problem, and if we don't fix it before, then we're screwed. That's like a brink analysis. Precedence, which is something Sasan likes to do a lot, and I don't actually mind, I think it's a pretty good idea in a lot of instances. It's a little weird because it kind of blurs the relationship, or the distinction at least, between uniqueness and links, okay? So precedence is basically where you say, there's been a problem like this before, and this thing that's kind of like the plan solved it. Or experts are saying something that could make things better is this thing that happens to be like the plan, right? So for instance, I don't know, this is like I guess a silly example. Let's go back to the economy. Maybe you're saying the economy's bad, economy's going to continue to be bad. However, experts have indicated that government spending on education is one of the #1 ways to be able to escape from the situation. You would do that assuming your plan is going to be giving money to, education. Precedence. Okay, let's talk about why those are our three uniqueness arguments. And specifically, one of the most important elements to understand is why we do the second one and not just this first one. Now, the reason we do that is because of something called thumpers. And I think I've talked about thumpers before. Danny, is it better for me to be on the left or the right side when I write something else? Or does it matter?
Depending, when it comes to this side, beyond.
No, sorry. I'm saying, can I use that side of the whiteboard or this side of the whiteboard? Which one's better for the camera?
We can just move it back a little.
There you go.
Yep.
All right, we're moving it back. Anyway, thumpers. Let's talk about thumpers for a second. Okay, thumpers are sort of quick, defensive arguments that challenge the link or uniqueness, generally speaking. Well, I'll explain what I mean by that. If all we did was say, stuff is bad, and we said, here's one warrant that says the economy is doing bad, our opponents could come in and really quickly read 8 arguments for why the economy is doing good. And those would be thumpers. And for the kids who've been to our first tournament, I had this prepared for you, right? We had a document where we have 8 reasons the economy's doing good, 8 reasons it's doing bad, 8 reasons the Democrats will win, 8 reasons the Republicans will win because the midterm elections are coming up. And you can use those every round. Like every round, you can prep those really quickly, and eventually by round 5, you're gonna have them memorized, essentially. So thumpers. If they win, stuff is good, the rest of your scenario doesn't matter because stuff already is good. Same thing with links, right? And thumpers on the links look more like something that is similar to the plan has already happened or is about to happen, which means your scenario would have been triggered anyway, the problem's going to solve itself, or in the case of a disad, the disad's going to happen no matter what. Disad's inevitable. That's what thumpers look like. So, thumpers, from 99% of teams in my experience, are all stuff is good or stuff is bad. And almost never stuff will continue to be good or continue to be bad. So if we're in a debate and we say stuff is bad, one reason, and then we go second, stuff will continue to be bad, one reason, and they come up and they go, here's 8 reasons stuff is actually good, if they do not respond to that second argument, we can come up in the next speech and just kind of grandstand and be like, Doesn't matter if the economy's doing good right now because you have fundamentally conceded that 6 months from now we are headed towards massive economic collapse. That generates uniqueness for the remainder of the position. We're good, you lose. Take your 27s and go to lunch. Okay? That's why we do this, guys. It's tricky. Basically, we do it to get around thumpers because thumpers are smart, thumpers are easy. We want to use thumpers because most people don't bother writing this, and it's so easy to beat them because of that, right? We can just kind of prep them essentially. But this helps us a lot with that kind of thing. Brink/precedence. Brink/precedence is good because essentially it functions in one of two ways. Either A, if it's a brink, it functions to help us win time frame analysis, right? So the time frame of the advantage versus the time frame of the disad, or potentially it helps us deal with certain counter plans, right? Now there's dumb counter plans called delay counter plans where the other team says, do the plan but after the election, or do the plan but after the new Congress, or whatever. They're not legitimate, but this is one way of dealing with those without having to read theory. Precedence does the same thing. Precedence is essentially an actor or mechanism key argument. And what I mean by that is, when they try and read a counterplan, if their counterplan is a different actor, we can leverage, you conceded that there's historical precedence that the United States doing it solves, but Canada doing it does not solve. You don't have any evidence that says Canada is good. We have evidence that says the United States is good. Reason to prefer the plan versus the counterplan. Or it could be a mechanism specifically. You say nuclear, we say solar, but you've conceded that solar empirically has been proven to resolve this issue and nuclear hasn't. Same exact kind of setup. Here's what I'm really trying to reveal, staring into the camera. This is really important, camera person who's watching this video. We're good. This is really important. The reason I'm giving this lecture is because Danny and Denise I asked them what kind of lectures to give, and they were talking about like refutation or like response, right? In the button lecture, you can put it down, Denise. Just let's say it'll be good. It'll be fine. The button lecture already exists. That's on the Proteus Debate Academy YouTube channel, whatever. This is what students do not get. When you're the AF, or when you're the NIG, but especially when you're the AF, the best answer to anything the other team reads that is not theory, so like as long as they're reading a disad, a counterplan, a critique, any of those things, the best answer is the AF matters more, or the best answer is something in the AF. If you're writing a good AF and you're following good rules, you shouldn't need extra prep to answer things the other team said. Your AF should be preemptive of the things we expect the other team to say. We expect them to say stuff is good, so we preempt them by having this predictive argument. We expect them to read a counterplan or a disad based on time frame, so we answer it preemptively. If the answers are already in the affirmative, you just need to know where they are. When I put up that guide yesterday on like writing files, again, I don't think you folks were here, I talked about how files really have 3 parts to them. Only one part of them is the actual case. The first part's an info sheet where you just give background on the topic. And the second part is a strategy sheet. When I say strategy sheet, it's just a sheet where all it says is, here's the plan text, here's a summary of the story of the advantage and the second advantage. And then lastly, here's arguments we expect the other team to make. Here's tricks to our case. That when I say tricks, I basically mean if the other team drops this argument, we get a free win, so like pay attention there. And then finally, like here's other files you could look at in our system, assuming we had them. We don't really do a lot of that at DVC, we're gonna start doing it. But bottom line, why do we have that strat sheet? So the MG does not, or the MO, does not actually have to prep the case. They can spend 1 or 2 minutes reading a summary of the case. They can have a clear indication of which arguments they need to win or which arguments the other team's gonna make, and then they can spend their time prepping on it, right? But if the work is done in the case, we write our cases effectively, we will win debates on our case. This is why I also tell you in the MG, I want you to start with our AF, not their negative. Why is that? If you're if you're the negative in the MO, start with your negative and then their AF. Why is that? Because if you're winning your case, it makes answering everything else really easy because you get to essentially assume the stuff you said is true, right? Which changes uniqueness, debate, link debate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, let's get on to the links. There's also 3 kinds of links. Okay, 3 kinds of links. The first one is the one you're used to, the most basic, which is basically plan causes / plan solves. If you're the affirmative, the first link is the plan solves. The plan, doing the plan, solves the problem that we've outlined in the uniqueness. That one's free. I'm not going to explain that one anymore. You should know this one at this point. But the other 2 are very strategic and kind of cheating, which is good. I love kind of cheating, okay? You gotta stop the line. But they are spotlight links and spillover links. Let's talk about what a spotlight link is. It's also called a perception link. Spotlight links are arguments where we say it's not that doing the plan literally solves the problem. It just brings attention to the problem, or it creates a perception or awareness of the problem, or the good thing, doesn't matter what it is. And that in and of itself is key to solving the problem, right? It's like cancer prevention versus cancer awareness. Some charities are trying to find a cure for cancer. Other ones are trying to raise awareness for cancer so that people will donate to that other charity, right? So spotlight / perception links are really good because if they get conceded, you pretty much win the debate. Because they make absurd claims, right? Like, so we do some minor thing. Let's say, like, we're gonna, in some way, I don't know, all women get an extra $1 in their paycheck. This is a silly example, okay? Now, does that actually solve inequality? Probably not, right? Whatever. But if we were to spotlight, like, we could be like, this spotlights the issues of inequality for women, which brings attention and momentum towards that issue, and they can see that. In our next speech, we get to be like, and now they get abortion rights back, or whatever, right? Because the momentum's there, which is silly, but they dropped it, okay? These arguments are not good, really, in a lot of senses. But if they're dropped, they're GG. They're end-game nonsense, okay? Like, you pretty much win. So they're good in that sense. They let us gain big access to things we shouldn't have access to for the most part. Now that's a silly spotlight. Perception, though, is actually a little bit more legitimate. Perception especially factors into things associated with like businesses or like countries when it comes to like power relationships. So, for instance, we've been talking about the hegemony disad and like allied confidence as a story associated with that. If our hegemony reduces, our allies don't feel safe anymore under the umbrella of the United States. Israel bombs someone, surely, and then that's bad, okay? But perception kind of factors into that. We don't even need to win that the plan actually makes Israel less safe. We just need to win they think it does. We don't need to win it's actually bad for businesses. We just need to win they think it's bad for businesses. That's perception. Again, if it gets dropped, GG. So lastly, spillover. Spillover is fairly similar, but spillover is just, if we do this, other things like this will happen. This is sometimes also called modeling. And the idea is like, if the US does something democratic, other countries will increase their democracy too. How fun is that? Or if we do this action for like women's rights, other women's rights policies will get passed, right? There's kind of a little bit of a blur here between spotlight and spillover, but bottom line, we just say like doing the AF is a first step that leads to momentum and other things being resolved as a result of it, or if it's a disad, the opposite, like you cause more things to get bad. Again, both of these not really winners when they are contested. If the other team answers these, just get away from them. Doesn't matter, don't answer it. Obviously they turn them to answer it, but if they're just like, that's stupid, you're wrong, you go, yeah, your friends, right? But if they don't answer them, G. Game's over. Game's over. Absolutely just body, okay? So then lastly, let's get to the second half. The second half actually has less of like the nuance and specifics here. And we'll come back to this in a second. Internal links. Internal links and impacts, actually. So internal links, the only thing I really want you to be aware of, when I'm trying to write internal links, I'm always trying to write them in the format of, or in the formula of, X is key to y. I say k2, but that means key to, okay? X is key to y. So whatever the link does is key to y, where y is the impact. So Allied confidence is key to preventing nuclear war. Wage equity is key to ending gender discrimination. Background checks are key to preventing school shootings. X is key to Y. And then you just start going down the list, like here's the first reason, the second reason, third reason, right? That's the easiest way to remember internal links for me. That's how I like the problem. We're not gonna spend more time there. Well, we'll spend one more second here. Why does X is K to Y mean anything? Why does it matter that we win doing the mechanism of the plan is key to the impact? What is that meant to answer? Counterplans. Once again, it's answering counterplans that rely on different mechanisms. If we win, solar panels are key to reducing global emissions. They don't get to win by saying nuclear, because nuclear is not a solar panel, right? Now they can make their own arguments, but if they don't have that, we can fall back on and really grandstand on. There was a massive concession about the requirements to solve for global pollution. In a world where you've conceded solar panels are the key internal link to resolving the issue, you don't win. Or treaties are key as opposed to sanctions or whatever it might be. X is key to Y. If it's not answered, we win. Against like counterpoint stuff.
Okay. I'm trying to get there. I'm really trying.
No, it's fine. What's your question?
Okay.
This is the whole point. Because the people at home don't get to ask, so you ask for them.
Okay, so understanding that, because I feel like you're going in a fast pace where I'm trying to like understanding. Can you go like much more slower?
Yeah.
Like talk to me like I'm a third grader.
Okay.
Yeah.
It tastes like root beer for some reason. Let's go to 0. X is key to Y.
Okay.
Okay. X, and I guess I'll write this. X equals link / mechanism / actor, doesn't really matter which one. Y equals impact scenario. So, let's go back to our silliest example ever. Murgling. You remember murgling, everyone? Murgling, the dog and the burglars come and then they get killed by like the dog. Cool.
Answer what murgling means.
Murgling is murder. It's burglars who murder you, okay? So if advantage 1 is about murgling, we'll stick with the basic structure until we get to the internal links. Uniqueness. There are murglers in our neighborhood. It's a bad D. Casing the area, okay? So they're looking for someone to murgle. The link, we get a dog. Because the plan, the resolution would have been Paul's gonna get a dog, whatever. Internal link. So now, we get to internal link, but let's go to impact. Because I always tell you folks, how should you write your advantages, disadvantages? Start from the bottom, then go to the top. So I told you about murgling. What do murglers do?
Kill you.
But also,
Murder you.
they murder you and they also
Rob you.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah. So one, they steal Paul's DVDs. 2, they kill Paul. Okay. And Paul is me, in case you're some random person watching us.
Yeah.
Okay. We know we have to go from here, which again is X, to here, Y. So what would our claim be for our internal link argument? Use that formula I wrote up here, right there, insert X and Y. What would the claim be?
Getting a dog is
Key to not being murgled.
Yeah.
Okay? Getting a dog is K2, no murgling. Okay? And then you explain why. And the ASA point would be they bark if they break in. And the BSA point is they protect. Okay, so if they do come in, my dog's gonna attack them. And maybe there's a CISA point, which is they just pick a different house, whatever it might be. But X is key to Y. When you look at this example, hopefully it's pretty clear that like when we're saying X key to Y, we mean link is key to impact scenario. Now, here's why this is good. They read a counter plan. Counter plan, Paul gets a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And they say getting a gun solves. Which of these things does a gun not solve? Now, a gun, probably protect. Okay? Okay, gun protect. But if I'm asleep, is the gun gonna wake me up?
No.
No. So that is our X is key to Y. Because we can come up, and I'll give you, I keep doing the same example because I'm so used to debate boys, right? But it's feel like, in a world where they've conceded that dogs uniquely solve for this problem as a result of waking you up from sleep, the affirmative is 100% winning, that it is net beneficial compared to the counter plan. Guns will not wake you up, dogs will. Both protect you. That's a win for the AF. And then you'd go, if you were really smart, especially in a world where the permutation means we can get a dog and get a gun. The dog lets us know when they come in, and then me and the dog shoot them together, okay? But that's what I mean by X is key to Y. Because we have a defense of a specific mechanism or actor, it could be the United States versus Canada, like I talked about earlier. Because we have that, when they read a counter advocacy, we can leverage those warrants and analysis as reasons why we're still preferable. Does that make a little more sense, Danny? Do you want me to do one more, or are we good?
No, I think I'm starting to get it because they have one thing, they are dropping essentially when we have two parts. Since we could be aware of, say, like they dropped this part, like we.
Yes.
It protects too.
A lot of
but it doesn't
debate.
work.
A lot of debate. Exactly. A lot of debate is about concession. Okay, especially the lower levels. In fact, I would say at the lower levels, all of debate is about concession. Because of the lower levels, and when I say lower levels, I mean anything but the top 5 or 10 teams in the country, period, okay? At that level, this is a silly analogy, but there's a silly analogy. People always say the difference between college football and pro football is that in college football, someone is always open. Someone's always open because the coverages aren't as good, or there's just some athlete who's a god tier athlete on one team and the other team's not as good. Someone is open. The quarterback always could go to that person if they were really good, right? Kind of the same deal here. In anything but the top level of debate, something is always dropped that can win you the debate. It's only at the very highest level that everyone answers everything, and now it's about actually kind of debating. So, yes, they drop this, we win.
Okay.
That's not just what it comes down to. One last example. Let's go back to this like solar panel versus nuclear thing. We're on team nuclear, they're on team solar. We read 2 warrants about nuclear. The ASA point for why nuclear is key to solve is that nuclear energy is just as clean as renewables, as proven by whatever. It's actually the safest power source in the world. But the BSA point is that crucially, nuclear energy is not intermittent, which is to say, wind energy only gives you energy when the wind is blowing. Solar energy only gives you energy when the sun is out. Nuclear works around the clock, so it is an essential part of a renewable infrastructure. So they come up and they say, solar's awesome. It doesn't pollute. It gives a ton of energy. We're good. What's our answer in our next speech? You have fundamentally conceded that solar energy, wind energy, it doesn't matter, neither can solve because they are inherently intermittent, i.e. the wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine, but god damn it, uranium is always burning hot. So you must have the plan to solve, permutations even better, blah, 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 okay? Same exact thing. They've missed the key part, the like secret. And when I talked about earlier about like, hey, the tricks to the affirmative or the tricks to the file, that's one right there. They don't, if their counterplan isn't some kind of nuclear, they lose. Unless they can win, nuclear is so bad that it doesn't matter that it solves better. It would cause a bigger problem on the side. We good?
Okay.
We'll move on to the impacts. Impacts is really just 2 things. You always want to have big stick, and then you want to have systemic / proximate / probable. What I mean by that is the following. You want one impact that is like the biggest deal, extinction, climate, great power wars, something horrible like that. That is probably unlikely. We've talked about why we should do that, even though it doesn't make a lot of sense, like from a real thinking person perspective. Again, what did I tell you a second ago? How are debates decided at the lower levels? concessions if they concede nuclear war, we win. That is literally why people read nuclear war, because if the other team doesn't answer it, you win. Even though it's stupid, you win, okay? And people don't answer stuff all the time, so that's good for us. Secondarily, we do it because we can always walk it back. We can kind of use it as an anchoring point. We can go for, you're right, we don't get to nuclear war, but we do get to great power war, or resource war, or proxy war, or terrorism. Like, we don't need step 5 in the chain. We'll take 3 and still win, or 2. Okay, so it's good as an anchoring point. But you also pretty much always do want to have a more probable, more proximate, meaning like immediate local thing we can directly change, more realistic, or otherwise systemic impact. Can we really weigh racism against nuclear war? Like, not really effectively, but judges are pretty much going to agree racism is bad and we should deal with it, right? And aren't going to want to be like, yeah, we should be racist to, people of color if it means preventing nuclear war. So you kind of want to have both in an ideal world, because it lets you play the game however you want. If you have a judge who's like, nuclear war is stupid, go for the other one. And since a lot of teams just do the big stick one and don't do this one, or just do this one and don't do this one, we have an advantage because we can always audible. Now here's the last thing I want to talk about with this. A big part of writing positions in this way is that it makes them what I call and what most people call internally collapsible. What do I mean by internally collapsible? We've talked about the word collapsing. Collapsing in debate is if we have like 3 disadvantages, we only go for one of them. We kick out of the other 2. But when I say internally collapsible, what I mean is, if someone takes out this second argument, we don't care, because we can win on this one, or on this one. If they take out this argument, we can win on this one, and so on and so forth. You want to write your position in such a way that if they take out any part of it, and it's only one part of that section, you can still win the position. And crucially, you can save time. Okay, again, we've talked about time is like everything in debate, because again, it's the most fundamental resource. It determines who's going to drop arguments, who's not, who's going to get good coverage, etc. So what I'm trying to say here is, we don't need to, let's go to the links, they drop all of them, just go for this one, who cares? Or go for this one, doesn't matter. Even though they did drop all of them, you don't win the debate extra because you have 2 links instead of 1. If we get 1 link to our position, we win the position, right? Or if we get 1 impact, kind of less so, we win the position. So writing it this way is really good because we're not all in. All of our eggs are not in one basket. We can collapse the position less. We can still extend stuff. We can leverage a lot of the offense against the opposition team, because this is already a preempt. This is already a preempt. This is already a preempt. This is already a preempt, like so on and so forth. All of those things are answers to your opponent's case. They don't know it, and you do. Okay, we're going to wrap up unless there's any questions about this section.
Can we see like a live action? How would this look like in a debate?
Yeah. I'm going to erase this.
Okay. Screenshot before this.
Screenshot. There's a video. Yeah. Pause. Okay. There's the affirmative. There's the negative. The affirmative reads a...
North Korea needs a firm.
Pause. Make it easier. I'm going to go, the affirmative reads advantage 1 is about econ, and I'll fill this out in a second. And the negative reads also an econ disadvantage, let's just say. They can have something else as well, but we'll just say they read econ as well. Or, let's say they didn't read this, they just read a bunch of case arguments, on econ, which will be thumpers. So let's talk about how this would function. So, assuming we did our job here, they're going to read thumpers. Okay, when I say case arguments, I mean they're not disads, they're reading arguments they prepared to answer our advantages or our top of case specifically. So they come up and they go, there's 8 reasons the economy is actually doing really good. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. That looks really bad if you're new, because we only read 1 or 2 reasons why the economy is doing bad. But what did they not answer? Well, they didn't answer that's going to continue to be bad. They didn't read the arguments that say it'll continue bad. So if we did, we can now say We will concede that the economy is currently doing good, but that is completely irrelevant in a world where they've conceded the predicted uniqueness claim. The economy is going to go to shit in 6 months, regardless of how good it's doing now. The warrant for that was from JP Morgan Bank. It says blah, 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 blah. This has a massive implication in the debate. It means the advantage is still true. We win the advantage, okay? Now, if they read a disad, instead of KSARs, they read a disad, and they said, econ is good, plan happens, makes econ bad, here's why that's bad, okay? Like generically. Same thing. If all of their uniqueness is just about the current status quo, we can go, yes, judge, it's a wash on whether the status quo is good or bad as of right now, but they've conceded it will definitely be bad in 6 months. Same thing, right? Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't just give us access to our advantage, it straight up answers and non-uniques their disadvantage. Their whole position goes away because we've done that, right? Okay. And then alternatively, their disad just says something along the lines of that same story. Econ is good, the plan's bad because it's not good for businesses, because it's about the environment, or whatever the hell, who cares, right? Just some generic thing about the affirmative link. Their links are very generic. Now is when we could leverage this. No, you've conceded why the specific mechanism of the affirmative is good. Nuclear is not the same as solar, and solar is not the same as wind. Their story is just anything environmental is bad. But we have specific analysis that tells you nuclear energy is uniquely different because X, Y, Z, that's an answer to their thing. Okay. How would this one work? We say, investing in education spurs the economy for whatever reason. They say investing in education makes the economy worse because we dump money in a system that's bad. We should be, private schools or whatever instead. Now, those two arguments hit each other and kind of cancel out. Like, we could try and win it by investing a bunch of time in it. They could try and win it by investing a bunch of time in it. But the problem is there's a response to it. Inherently, there's a response because we're saying the opposite of each other, right? But if they didn't answer these, we get to say, regardless of whether it is factually good for the economy to invest in education or factually bad, they have fundamentally conceded doing the plan creates a momentum for broader reform to the education system. All of the reasons they say investing in education is bad assumes the current system, not the one that gets created in a world of doing the plan. We're the first step to reforming the system they don't like. So that's kind of what's happening here. Bottom line, because you have more specificity and more options and more preempts and things, you can leverage them against more generic positions. And the affirmative, to a certain degree, is always ahead of the game. They're always one jump ahead of the other team because they know what the plan is going to be and they get to choose their ground essentially in how they do that. So the app should always be winning specificity. And the negative instead has to rely on generics, right? So it's really important when you're the app to be able to leverage these kind of things and explain it. That make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, one final example, which I already talked about a little bit, but I'll put it on the board just so it's clear. Plan is invest in nuclear. Counter plan, invest in solar. Their first argument is solar solves pollution. The second argument is solar is cheaper. And our arguments for nuclear are: 1, nuclear solves pollution. 2, nuclear is not intermittent. So, they're going to go up and say, we treat it like algebra, okay? But like 5th grade algebra, not like college algebra, okay? We start off, we have the two sides of the equation, and we start canceling things out, okay? So they solve pollution, we solve pollution. Mm-hmm. What's left? Well, they're going to win by saying solar is cheaper and winning that doing cheap is good. How are we going to win? By saying nuclear power is not intermittent, i.e. it always works and solar doesn't. So then the debate's going to be about who does better work on those things. Now let's pretend all they said was solar solves pollution. Well, now it's just a clean win for us because we're going to win that solar can't solve to the same degree because we have in X is key to Y. Or as That's referring to a mechanism-specific defense. We're ready to defend that our specific way of solving the problem is good. A lot of counterplan in plan debate is plan solves problem, counterplan is a different way of solving problem. Which one's a better way of solving the problem? X is key to Y is why ours is better. Okay, does that all make sense, Denise?
So like in the scenario where the negation says, you know, we're solving for pollution, but our way is cleaner, you could just come in and be like, you know, the amount of cleanliness here, you know,
Is outweighed
by how nuclear is intermittent and will always work.
Or it's not intermittent, but yes.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what you do.
Okay.
Any other questions? Another one. Wrap it up, Danny. Hit the button.
Yeah.
Bye.
But